Hello and welcome to the next video in the Inventor Tips and Tricks series. Today we're going to be looking at Inventor Projects, and the reason for that is I think a lot of people who are self-taught and just work on their own probably don't use projects, and if they don't, they can get into a bit of a mess, and I'll explain why a bit later on. Well, actually, hopefully the reason why will become apparent a bit later on. But it's a good idea just to give you guys a heads up on what projects are and why they're of a use to you, even if you work on your own. So, a project. You'll find the projects area, or the projects dialog box, when you boot Inventor up. This is Inventor 2015. 2016 is going to drop imminently, but as far as I know, there isn't too much, as in fact, very little new in the projects bit. Very little's changed in them for a long time anyway. And it's the button for it is up here on your panel bar. So you go to the Get Started tab, and then you've got projects here. So click that, and then you've got this. Right, your projects list might look, well, the structure of it will be the same, but you might have different projects listed here. If you've never used projects, the chances are you've just got default ticked, and I'll explain what that is in a second. The rest of the projects that you might see will be projects that have been just bundled in with Inventor when you've installed it. So what are they? Right, well, a project file and a project itself is a way for you to tell Inventor where you're going to save your files. The project tells Inventor where the files for the job that you're working on are going to be stored, so when you open up a drawing or an assembly, it knows where to search for all the links to the drawings and the assemblies. Obviously, an assembly, let's just move this aside here, there's an assembly here. That assembly of the PC needs to know where the case top is, it needs to know where the metal bracket at the bottom is, it needs to know where the graphics card, all those different parts and assemblies. Your top level assembly needs to know where they are, and you can't realistically expect Inventor to search your entire PC, or if you're in an office, the entire server or network to locate a file. So the project file gives Inventor this little umbrella region, this little folder structure. And it says, right, when I open up this assembly, all my files are going to be underneath here. And that here is your workspace area, right? That's the bones of what a project is and what it's for. So, if you're working on the default project, there is no workspace. So you're essentially using Inventor like AutoCAD, or like Word or Excel. There is no workspace at all. You can save your files wherever you want. You can drop them on your C drive, your D drive, your E drive, on a CD, on wherever you want. But the next time you open up your drawing or your assembly, if Inventor can't find a file because you might have moved it or renamed a folder, it's going to fall to bits. It's going to say, I can't find this file, resolve this link, and you're going to have to manually find the files yourself, which can take flipping ages. So the default project is good in that it allows you a little bit of flexibility to save things wherever you want to, but if things do get a bit funky, then you could be in a bit of bother trying to find files. So that's what the default project's for, but we're not going to roll with the default project because we're bros around here and we're going to use things properly. So we're going to create a new project, and I'm going to show you how to make it, and I'm going to show you how you set up the various bits and pieces in here. These bits and pieces, right? These are the settings for the project file. Each project file has a bunch of settings, pretty much uniform across all projects. A lot of them you don't need to know about. A lot of them are just legacy settings from a time gone by. But there is some, 3 or 4 settings in here which really do count, and we need to know what those are. So what we're going to do is make a new project. So when would you use a project? Well, you use a project per job. If you're working on I don't know, you're designing a product for company XYZ, you'd create a project file for company XYZ, and you'd save all the files for that project, for that job, whilst you're working on that project file. You might get another job come in for another customer. You'd create another project file for that customer, and you save the files in that project file's workspace. So you can keep your files separate, or if you want to, you can just have one project file for you and save your files underneath the one folder. And then Inventor still knows to search underneath that one folder. So it's up to you how many project files you have. That's entirely personal preference. But once you understand how they work, then you can make that choice. So what we're going to do is create a new project file now. So obviously you hit the new button here, and you've got 2 types of project file. We're not going to go here. Vault project is when you're using Vault with Inventor. You create a project file, you tell it it's going to be a Vault project file, and then you've got additional settings to link that project file into a Vault, which we're not going to do. That's another story for another day. So we're going to keep, and don't worry too much about the wording here. This is bad terminology on Autodesk's behalf. Single user project doesn't mean that only one person can use it. Not at all. Single user simply means it's not a Vault project. So we're going to hit next, and then you give your project a name. So we're going to say this is just going to be called company, like I said, company XYZ. Right, but you can call it whatever you want. You can call it the name of the actual design you're working on. The name of the project file is entirely, it's up to you. It doesn't matter. The next bit is the most important bit. It's the project workspace folder. So this is where the project file itself is going to be. It's where it's going to save it to, and then it's going to also be the top level folder in your workspace. So all files that you create will be saved underneath this folder. So you can then come to Windows Explorer, go to a drive, I don't know, you can put it on your C drive, or if you've got like an additional drive, like an E drive, you can say, right, well, let's just create a new folder under here, call it company XYZ. If you are working in an office, this folder could be on a network, so this could be on the S drive or the T drive, you know, and a lot of other people can then connect to that drive, load the project file in, and then everybody can then collaborate and save their files underneath the same folder. So you might have 10 people in one office. If you do have 10 people in one office, you really should be using Vault, but if you do and you don't have Vault, 10 people could load in the project file from this folder, and then they're all saved into the same folder. So you could do that. So there's our company XYZ folder. Notice that it's empty at the moment. So what we can do in the project workspace bit in the projects area is just hit the browse button, go to that E drive, go to company XYZ and just hit OK. And then it's going to create a new project file called E company XYZ, and then the project file itself has an IPJ extension, obviously short for Inventor Project. So that's where it's going to save it. Hit next. This bit here is, we don't really need to know about this at the moment. This is if you've got standard library folders which you want to share across multiple projects. So you might have an extra folder somewhere else on the network which contains a load of standard nuts and bolts and washers, or standard parts from suppliers that you've brought in. You can create a library folder somewhere else outside of your project area region, and then Inventor will reference these one-off folders, and it'll search those folders as well for files when you open up assemblies and drawings. So we're not going to worry too much about those at the moment. We're just going to hit finish, and then that creates us our company XYZ project. It ticks it automatically. The tick means that that project file is the active project. Another important point to note about projects is, good or bad, it's arguable, you can only work on one project at a time. And if you've got a file open in the background of Inventor, you can't switch between projects. Switching is just a double click or a right click, and you can't even activate it as a double click. So you can only do that whilst Inventor's idle with no files open, and you can only have one project ticked at a time. So what that means in real terms is that if you are working on a project and you've got a file open, you can't just suddenly decide, I'm going to just open up a quick file from another company or another customer's project and just switch projects and open it up. You have to shut what you're working on down, shut it all down, and then activate the other project file, and then you can do that. Okay, go back to the other folder, and you'll see now we've got company XYZ IPJ listed underneath here, and now you're free to create farts. You create a folder called parts, or it's up to you how you structure these. You can have assemblies, parts assemblies, and drawings. And that's it. You can now start saving your files underneath here. So let's just test this out. We've got company XYZ ticked. I can click done. When I click open, it'll now automatically default to that workspace folder. So it doesn't default your My Documents folder, and you have to go, oh, bollocks, I'm going to browse, browse to the folder where my files are. No, because we've got this project file active, and Inventor knows where the top level of the workspace is. Whenever you hit open, whenever you hit save, it's going to default to the workspace where your project file is located, which makes things a lot easier. So that's the workspace in a nutshell. Really, it's very simple. It's quite a simple methodology behind it, and it works quite well. Alright, the settings that we've got under here, a lot of them you don't need to worry about. It's a single user project. That's the location of the project file. Included file doesn't matter. Style library, I'm going to do another video on style library, so we're just going to leave that for now, but you can just leave it for now as read only, or you can, if you want to, change it to read write. If you do plan on making changes to the style library, just right click on it and change that setting. The appearance library, material library, right. Another benefit of having project files is that you can control the way Inventor references material and texture libraries dependent on which project you're working on. So you might, if you're that kind of guy, have a specific appearance texture library for a certain customer, and you can load that appearance library in just for this one project. Another project, you might be using a whole different library altogether with different textures in it, different materials. Probably not though. Probably not. In most cases, you'll just have one central appearance library, just one material library, and you'll use that across all projects. But that's where you would control it within here. So you can right click on here and you can add a library, and that'll then go and add a library from wherever it's saved and then attach it so it'll be used in this project. Sometimes you'll find people go, I can't find my materials, I'm working on something and I can't find it, it's not loading up the material library. Well, the first point of call is usually to come into your project file just to make sure that the material library that you do want to reference is actually listed in here. So that's the material and appearance library. The workspace, yeah, you can just leave the workspace where it is. You do tend to play around with this if you've got a Vault project, but we don't need to do anything about here. The workspace is just a dot. That just means the workspace it's a relative path to the top level of where the project file's saved. So your workspace is actually at company XYZ. If you wanted to have your workspace a couple of folders down, you can right click on here and then edit that, and then you can see here visibly it is saying that's where your workspace is, but you can have it a couple of levels down if you want to. Okay, right, libraries. If we did add libraries in, that would be listed in here. You can add additional paths. Additional paths would be, like I said earlier, would be folders which aren't in your workspace. They're somewhere else on a server or on your computer, and then when Inventor opens up files, it can reference these paths that you add when you're opening up assemblies and drawings. It'll scan those for additional parts which aren't in your workspace. Frequently used subfolders, right? This is actually quite a handy one. Frequently used subfolders is when you opening or saving, opening and saving, it'll give you a shortcut to folders within your workspace that you use on a regular basis. They're only really useful if you do have quite a big workspace. So let's go into the company XYZ folder, and let's say this is going to be, I don't know, standards or supplier parts, something like that. In frequently used subfolders, you can say add a path. Add a path, and then we can say browse to company XYZ supplier parts, and then for the name of it, that's the actual path, and then this is the name as it will appear in the left hand side panel of the open dialog box. So we can just say it's going to be supplier parts, and then we can add another one, add path, browse, and then the other one was just standards, and then we can just rename this one here to standards. There we go. So that's frequently used subfolders. Right, the other really important area of your project file is the folder options. The folder options is where you tell Inventor where your templates are stored, where your content center files are going to be saved to, and where your style library is. If you haven't changed anything from the defaults, you can just leave those as they are. But if you're working in an office, I cannot stress this enough. If you're working in an office where more than one person is collaborating on a project, under no circumstances leave this content center files option as default, because when you use the content center and you place a nut, a bolt, a washer, Inventor will pull that file from the content center. Don't forget the content center is just a big database of numbers. It will then model the bolt that you've asked for, and it will save it in your My Documents folder, which is great for you because when you open up the assembly that uses that bolt, your PC will be able to find it because it's in your My Documents. But if Bob across the office opens up your assembly because it's saved on the network, Inventor is going to try and look to your My Documents to open up that bolt, and Bob won't be able to see that bolt because it's in your My Documents folder. So you need to change this Content Center folder, edit that, and then change this to an area on the network. Really can't stress that enough. So what I would suggest you do, if you are working on a networked project file, create a new folder under here and call it Content Center Files, center with an RE if you're in England and you spell it the right way. We'll right click on here, we'll go to edit, and then we'll browse, and then assuming that this IPJ was on a network, we can go into company XYZ, and then there you go. Whenever you create a nut, bolt, or washer, it's going to save that into the folder within the workspace. So everybody in the office will be able to reference those content center files. Now, the templates and the style libraries, you can if you want to. Again, it's a video for another day, but you can take a copy of your templates, or when you start a new file and you've got the list of the IAMs and the IPTs and the IDWs, you can copy that templates folder and put it on the network so everybody's using the same templates folder, and the same goes for the style library. If you hover your cursor over it, it'll tell you where Inventor's looking for your style library and your templates at the moment. You can go to that folder shown there in the tooltip, copy it, put it on the network, right click on here, edit the path that it's looking for it, and then change it to the path on the network that you've copied it to. You can do that as well. But if you don't do that, it's just going to look for the styles and the templates on your PC. Again, if you're in an office where multiple people are using the same project, you will have, at this point, the way it's set up now, 10 different people using styles and templates that are all on their PC. So you don't have a centralized styles area and a centralized templates area. But like I say, you can copy them onto the network and sort that out. Options. There's nothing too much to worry about in here. The old versions is something which some people, it's personal preference. Old versions to keep on saved. So what it does is it creates in your workspace, we haven't got one yet, but it'll create like an old version, there it is, old versions folder, and it'll create like a backup. Whenever you save something, it creates an old version of the file that you've saved and puts it in this old versions folder. This setting here tells Inventor how many old versions to keep. One is obviously one old version. You can increment that by up to whatever you want. There probably is a limit, I'm not too sure what it is. -1 is all, so it'll just keep an old version of everything, which is essentially a backup of everything. Or you can set that, if you just don't want any old versions, you can just edit that and say, I don't want any old versions, which is 0. But if you're not using Vault, highly recommend that you save a setting of 1 or 2, just so you've got a backup in case anything does go wrong. Okay, right. The next thing that we need to know about project files is Content Center libraries, because the project file tells Inventor which Content Center libraries you're going to be using on this project. Now, you tend not to pick and choose. If you're using a Content Center, you want to use all libraries, but you can, if you want to, hit this button here, which somehow vanishes, graphically glitched, but go to configure Content Center libraries, and depending on whether you're using a Vault server or the desktop content, you can pick and choose. So you can untick and say, well, when I'm using this project, I don't want to use the mold libraries. I'm not going to be interested in the JIS standards or the GOST standards. I'm just going to use the rest of them that I ticked. Click OK, and then when you use the Content Center, place from the Content Center, whilst you're using this project, it's not going to reference any parts from the libraries that aren't ticked. So you can control that as well. Okay, that's pretty much it for project files. Hit save. You might get a message like this to say it's going to be migrated. I have no idea why. I've just created it in 2015. I don't know why it needs to be migrated, but never mind. Click done. And now when we create a new file, so we're just going to create a new part file, and then we can just save it. And what it'll do, the save dialog box will automatically default to our company XYZ workspace. Notice on the left hand side we've got our frequently used subfolder, so there's supplier parts, there's standards, or you can jump back to the top level of the workspace and save your part in the parts folder. And now whenever you do create assemblies and you create drawings, Inventor will always search for the links to those files and assemblies and drawings within this umbrella folder structure down here. So you can create as many folders as you want, as long as they're underneath here. Another thing to note with project files as well, if you do try and save something outside of your project file area, so if you do just decide to be a complete renegade here and say, right, well, okay, I'm not going to save it under company XYZ, I want to save my file to my desktop, you're going to get this message here: the selected location is not in the active project. Do you wish to continue the save? That's Inventor giving you a warning. It's saying, look, son, you've got to save your files in your workspace, but I'm going to let you save it on the desktop, but just be noted that it's not wise, because if you do have a link or a reference to this file in a drawing, I ain't going to find it on your desktop for you. That's down to you. It's on you here. So do you want to carry on? Be it on your own head if you do. So if you click yes, it will let you open up and save that file to your desktop. There it is, but it's giving you the warning. It's saying, I did warn you. If you cannot find it later on, it's your problem. So I think that's pretty much it for projects. The only other thing I really wanted to clarify is just when you do have a part open, notice that you cannot change projects. Inventor's going to say the active project cannot be. The message is self-explanatory. You don't really, I'm sure you're an intelligent bloke or woman. You'll be able to notice what that message says and what it means. So you have to shut this down and go, okay, I want to change projects. Okay, and then once you've got your files shut down, it will let you change between projects. So that's what projects are. That's how you create them. That's what they're all about. So my next video, I think, as long as I can structure it properly, is going to be a video on how to use the Inventor style library, how to edit it, how to modify it, and just an explanation of how it works, because it is a bit mind befuddling. So that's it for projects. Thank you very much, guys. If you found that useful, please press like on the video. If you didn't, please press dislike and put some comments down below. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I'm nearly up to 1,000. Way! Getting there. Nearly as big as PewDiePie. But thank you very much, and until next time. Toodle.